Okay, this is our website, capecountyteaparty.org. If you get a minute, don't have anything else to do while you're sitting at the keyboard, go ahead and open this one up, go through it. We have several links, calendars. The calendar will tell you, take you to all of the meetings that go on here in Cape County, school board meetings, county commission meetings, board of aldermen, planning and zoning. Well, they're just meetings, right? We elected people to put in there, so we don't have to go to any of those meetings, right? Wrong, because those elected people are making decisions on your behalf. They are your proxy. They're making decisions on your behalf, and if no one's there to say, hey, what? You're going to use my tax dollars for what? You're going to use, you know, if you're not there to raise your hand and ask a question, they're going to just keep on making those decisions that you elected them for, whether you agree with them or not. Because as we know, not just in our own county, but across the United States, our elected officials do not represent the citizens. And so if you're not a voice, then they're going to keep doing it. And how do you become a voice? Well, golly, I've never been involved in politics. I'm not a politic person, but I am a citizen of the United States. And so our Constitution, and we have constitutions, as a matter of fact, we have brand new, this is last year's Constitution, we have brand new Missouri Constitutions right there, and we have a whole bunch of them to give away. If anybody would like them, Susie and Barbara have them, they're the purple ones. Please take a Constitution. Article 1, Section 1 of the Missouri Constitution says, all power, let me ask you this, how many think that the government has too much power? Raise your hand. Okay, so tell me then, why does Article 1, Section 1 say, sorry, this one isn't mine, mine's all marked. Article 1, Section 1 says, all power is inherent in the people. The political power, that all political power is vested in and derived from the people. Now that's just in Missouri. The United States Constitution doesn't say it that way, but every state constitution says that all power is vested right here, you as the citizen. So how do you become involved? We do training. We do training, Center for Self-Governance, and we firmly stand behind the teaching that this class will teach you the tools of how to go speak to your elected officials. The first level is an 8-hour class. Teaches you exactly a little bit of history, how we got to where we're at, brief history, but it will empower you by the end of that 8 hours. I promise you, you will be a changed person by just listening to the paradigm shift, how you can go speak to your elected representatives. How many people in here have taken at least a level 1 class? Show of hands. Does anyone say that it didn't change your way of thinking? So if you're interested, we can host a class at any time. We prefer to have at least 5 students. We will not do a class of more than 30 students. I've got a couple of August dates open if anyone is interested. And if you have a certain group or a handful of people at your house and you want us to come and teach your class, we would be glad to do that as well. Okay? Next. The teapot, we're going to pass this because Cape County Tea Party, we put on a monthly meeting for everyone, so we're going to pass our teapot for a donation. If you feel so moved to do so to help us out. Occasionally we do help students attend the Center for Self-Governance classes. We also do stuff for communities. We're doing fundraisers, and we give 10% back to 2 local organizations, Options for Women and Love Incorporated. So we do tithe back as well as the donations. So, any questions so far about anything? All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Are you ready, Denise?
No.
Announcements. We can do. Oh, Wes. Yeah, there we go. I knew something was up. Wes, you've got a few minutes. I'll turn this over to Wes, and he'll introduce himself to you guys and tell you what he's got.
Hello everyone, my name is Wes Medler. I'm the owner of Crisis Food Source and CrisisFoodSource.com. And I'd like to take a couple minutes here to show you some of the preparedness items we have readily available here today. Long-term emergency seeds, water purifiers that can filter water from any creek, stream, stagnant pond, all viruses, bacteria, and parasites. Cysts and triple spreading will be removed. Fire starters, medical kits, we have a wide variety. Then we have the emergency long-term food storage that you see in the buckets. They'll store 10 to 15 years. Some will store up to 20 years. And then we actually have a way that you can store your local grocery store items like pasta, oats, rice, in a Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. It will store for 10 years. So you can do this for your emergency food storage items also. We have emergency radios, seed starting mix, whey powdered milk, and candle lanterns, and just a wide variety of emergency meals that we may need. So come up, take a look. I'll field any questions, and then I'll give it back over to you guys.
That's it? Okay. Another thing that, yeah, thank you. You know where you're located?
225 South Plaza Lane, Kate.
Behind the BG's.
Right behind you.
West has great stuff, great little place in there. Yeah. Another thing we are doing is a 50-50 drawing. And Barbara, you have those tickets somewhere? If anyone is interested, they're $1 a ticket or 6 for $5. For the tickets. Anybody want tickets? And we'll bring them up here. There we go. Anybody else want some tickets? And we'll have the drawing at the end of the meeting. Yes, folks want tickets. Question or ticket? Thing I'm sorry, we're a little. This is a great crowd, and I'm glad to have her tonight. The list of the public meetings. I'm going to put this back on the back table, so that when you choose to attend your Kent County Commission meeting, or your Board of Aldermen, or your school board, they're all on here. So you can have this back there, as well as governance policies. If you have anything at all that you would like to discuss with me, call me at any time. My number's everywhere, and it's actually out there if you go Google search now. I'm not quite on the radical ones yet, but some of my friends are. So anyway, I'm working my way up. That's right. That's right. So feel free to contact me at any time. My name is Jan Farrar, janfarrar@reagan.com. All right. This was a work.
My name's Janet Riddle, and I'm kind of the make-do MC because the person who was supposed to be MC was over there helping with the technical difficulties.
I'm done now. You want me to take over?
I'm all right.
Okay.
And I know that you're not here to listen to me, so I'm going to read through Mr. Federer's bio real quick and turn it over to him. So that you're here to listen to him. William J. Federer is a nationally known speaker, best-selling author, and president of AmeriSearch Incorporated publishing company dedicated to researching America's noble heritage. Bill's American Minute radio feature is broadcast daily across America and by the internet. Bill has made many appearances on television, including C-SPAN, Fox, Hannity and Holmes, O'Reilly Factor, and many more. Bill has been interviewed on thousands of radio programs, including Focus on the Family, Janet Marshall's America, Point of View, USA Radio Network, to name a few. Bill's American Minute radio feature is broadcast daily across America and by the internet.
Okay, I'm watching.
Bill's first book, America's God and Country Encyclopedia Quotations, has sold over 500,000 copies. His works, which have been quoted by authors, politicians, leaders, and journalists, teachers, students, and court cases, include American Minute, Events of American Significance Remembered on the Date They Occurred, American Quotations on CD-ROM, Backfired, Nation Born for Religious Tolerance and No Longer Tolerates Religion, Change to Chains, The 6,000-Year Quest for Control, Endangered Speeches, How the ACLU, IRS, and LBJ Threaten Extinction of Free Speech. George Washington Carver, His Life and Faith in His Own Words, Islamic Conquest, Past and Present, Library of Classics, Prayers of Presidents, St. Patrick, The Faith of FDR, The Interesting History of Income Tax, the original 13, the 10 Commandments and their influence on American law, There Really Is a Santa Claus, the history of St. Nicholas, and Christmas holiday traditions. Bill has spoken across America at events from Mount Rushmore to the Lincoln Memorial to the U.S. Capitol. He has addressed audiences with congressmen, senators, candidates, sports stars, military officers, and spoken at political conventions, debates, U.S. House of Conference Committee, U.S. military bases, state capitals, legislative hearings, and many more. Bill has gained national recognition for lecturing and writing, receiving an honorary doctorate in humanities from American Christian College in 2004, and honorary doctorate of global leadership from Midwest University in 2013. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Mr. Lopez.
It's an honor for me to be with you, and thank you for coming out tonight. And thank you, Jan, for the great work you're doing, and the Cape County Tea Party. I do get a chance to speak all around the country, and there are people that are really interested in the direction our country's going, so you're part of something bigger. I just want you to know that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and begin my presentation, and I might need a little help with the clicker here. We switched it out at the last minute, and it's coming up with a little menu there. Am I clicking this right?
Yeah, I think it's trying to fight me. So I'm going to be your clicker.
Or, let's see here.
You want me to get IT?
Yeah, it's not working for that distance, so I'll have to advance for you.
You want me to go get the IT guy?
Or if you want to, we can swap out my computer.
Okay, you want to click real quick?
Let's do that over.
Figure that out.
If you won't mind, somebody wants to. Everybody's attention here, I apologize.
You want to sing a song? Star Spangled Banner? America the Beautiful. You want to sing? Yeah, sure. Start us off. Oh, beautiful, for spacious as forever waves of grain, for purple mountains and you see of the fruited plain. America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy youth with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Not bad for you. Got a good voice.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and talk while the little green line is going across the screen. I do want to mention two things about one of the books on the table. It's called Miracles in American History. My wife has heard me speak for about 30 years, and she decided to pick out the best stories, and they're ones where there's a crisis, people with faith and courage rise up, and things turn around. So there's stories from the French and Indian War, Revolution, the War of 1812. People forget, in the War of 1812, 4,500 British troops invaded our U.S. Capitol. And British Admiral George Cockburn actually goes into the White House. Dolly Madison had fled, taking the painting of George Washington off the mantle of the fireplace. And this British Admiral sits down, eats dinner, and then sets the Capitol on fire. Then he goes to the chair, our U.S. Congress, and has his men sit in the chairs of our congressmen. He goes to the speaker's podium, and he says, who votes to burn the U.S. Capitol? They all say aye, and they burn our Capitol. They burn the Library of Congress, the Navy Yard, the Treasury, the Patent Office, and finally dark clouds roll in, and storms grow to a frightening roar. Tornadoes touch down, actually picks up British cannons, throws them yards away. Rains come and extinguish the fires. One British historian said, more British soldiers were killed by this stroke of nature and by all the firearms the Americans had mustered in the feeble defense of their capital. And so the president, James Madison, goes on to proclaim a national day of fasting and prayer. It's like, okay, God, you got our attention. And so that's just one of the stories that's in the book, Miracles in American History. So anyway, so I think we got this. This might be working. Let's.
Yep, it's
Oh, there we
working.
go.
Good job.
All right. What's your name again?
Enos.
Enos. Let's give Enos a hand. Now, most Muslims are not violent, but some are. And it's those some we're concerned about because 9 of the 10 worst countries persecuting Christians are Islamic countries. The 10th is North Korea. And so we see Boston bombings, Fort Hood shootings. We have beheadings in Oklahoma that recently happened. We have, in Michigan, the street signs are in Arabic in the Dearborn area.
Oh my goodness.
These are people that don't like our form of government. And, we see in Pakistan, they actually have, there's an Oscar-winning documentary published in the LA Times, reported on, and it's called Saving Face. The Muslim young men will ride up on a motor scooter and throw acid in a girl's face if she's not covered with a burqa, and then they ride off. And this poor girl is permanently scarred. And CNN reported child brides that Muslims have, because Muhammad's youngest wife was 6 years old. In Saudi Arabia, as we speak, they have weekly killings. It's called Dira Square, Justice Square. The Quran specifies that when you stone a woman, you're to bury her halfway and then use small stones, so it takes a long time. I talked to a U.S. soldier that had been stationed over there, and when an American is present, they push him to the front so they can witness it. He says, I witnessed a stoning to death. And so this is corporal punishment. We have an 8th Amendment that says no cruel and unusual punishment. Sharia law says to cut off the hand of a thief. And this is Nigeria. This is happening right now in these countries, in Afghanistan and Iraq. Whole villages in Nigeria, they're Christians, are being killed by the Boko Haram Muslims in the north. Here's a news report. A 16-year-old Moroccan girl committed suicide after the judge ordered her to marry her rapist. This is Sharia law. This is a CBN reported. A pastor was sentenced to death for not converting to Islam. There's an international outcry. And he is still in prison where? In Iran. And we just decided to give them, what, like billions of dollars, and he's still in there. CBS reported a 19-year-old girl was stoned to death for participating in a beauty pageant. Her killer said that she had violated the laws of Sharia. And CNN reported a 14-year-old girl was raped by her 40-year-old uncle. When the local imam found out, she was ordered to be whipped 101 times for allowing herself to be used as a tool of Satan to tempt the man. And so she died after the 70th whip, a young girl in the middle there. Egypt, the boy was sentenced to 3 years in prison for a Facebook posting they considered insulting to Islam. This is in Kingston, Ontario. An Islamic Afghan man and a polygamous wife killed a co-wife and 3 teenage daughters, accusing them of being too westernized. This is Kenya, the mall killings, and here we have all kinds of horrible stuff. These are churches that have been in existence for nearly 2,000 years in Syria, Iraq, Egypt, the Middle East, and they're being annihilated. I was in an airport, there's an Assyrian bishop, he's all dressed in black with a big silver cross around his neck, and I said, well, tell me what's going on over there. He says, there are areas where Christianity is totally exterminated. He goes, I'm a bishop in the area. He says, it's all gone. And it's happening under our watch. And I'll get into it more, but it's actually happening with our weapons and our Humvees and our training that we've given to the ISIS. Anyway, so this is the tomb of Jonah. It existed from 700 BC up until last year when the ISIS Muslims destroyed the grave. It had been there in Nineveh or Mosul, Iraq. And then this is the Museum of Antiquities in Mosul, Iraq, and the Muslims literally went in and destroyed stuff that existed from 700 BC. And so the question is why? Why do some Muslims, not all, but why do some Muslims persecute Christians and Jews and do all this type of activity? Well, they think they are following the example of Muhammad. And so Muhammad was the best Muslim that ever lived. And his life is called the Sunnah, which means the way or the example. So when there's killings, like the shootings that went on in Chattanooga, like any type of incident that you see in the news, that we have immediately the president and others saying, well, they don't represent true Islam. Yet in many cases, the very ones doing the killing are yelling Allahu Akbar, and they think they are representing true Islam. Who can tell us who represents true Islam? Muhammad. He's the only one. Muhammad was the best Muslim that ever lived. And so his life is the standard of what a good Muslim is. And so if we examine Muhammad's life, we can see that it went through 3 distinct phases. And so those wanting to follow Muhammad's example, they follow these 3 distinct phases. Muhammad was a religious leader, then he became a political leader, then he became a military leader. And you can walk with me through this. So this is the world 20 years before Muhammad was born. This is the Byzantine Christian Empire. So we have Rome, Italy, persecuted Christians for 3 centuries. Constantine becomes the emperor, and eventually the entire Roman Empire around the Mediterranean is Christian. And so in 570 AD was when Muhammad was born. So this is the map 20 years before Muhammad was born. And now it is being attacked from Persia. And it was the Sassanid Persians, and they conquered into North Africa and Egypt and the Middle East and into what is today Turkey. And so these were the 2 superpowers, sort of like the USSR and the USSR and the USA were the 2 superpowers. Back then, it was the Byzantine Christian West and the Sassanid Persian East. They beat each other up and left a power vacuum that into came Islam. So, some history. Muhammad's father died before he was born. His mother died when he was 6 years old. His grandfather and guardian died when he was 8 years old. So he was orphaned and taken in by an uncle named Abu Talib, who would take Muhammad on camel rides because he was a merchant. So Muhammad would go to different cities and he would hear about the different religions. And he'd hear about the pagan religions. In Arabia, there were 360 different pagan gods. They were mostly Canaanite fertility gods associated with the sun, the moon, Baal, Ashtaroth, and so forth. And Persia was Zoroastrian. There was the Jewish communities and then Christian. Now, in 595 AD, Muhammad is 25 years old, and he marries a wealthy widow named Khadijah. She's 40 years old. Muhammad now does not have to work. He spends time, he goes out into caves and prays, which is what the Desert Fathers did back then. So Christianity had embraced their version of separation of church and state, and it was this idea that if you really became a Christian, you were expected to give away your property and live in a cave, or give away your property and build a platform in the desert and bake in the sun, thinking you're denying your flesh and getting holier. But it was all this type of self-attention. Anyway, so Muhammad followed that example, and he went out to a cave and prayed. And so we see this is in Arabia. Each town had its own favorite god, and it was the Allah for that town. Well, Mecca was a big city, and the Allah for Mecca, the most popular god, was Hubal, the moon god. And these pagans had their calendar begin with the first sight of the crescent moon over the desert. This got incorporated into Islam with the crescent moon. And the pagans had a rock that they thought had fallen from the moon. It was a glass impact rock where a meteor hit the hot desert sand, melted it into this brown glass. In the Middle Ages, it was destroyed in a fire, and what was left, they put in this big silver rim. And so the pagans kissed this rock for centuries, pre-Muhammad. Well, Muhammad kissed this rock, and it got incorporated into Islam. That rock, along with 360 other different pagan gods, was in this square building called the Kaaba. And the pagans would walk around the rock, bow to this rock, and so forth. The Persians were Zoroastrian. Zoroastrians believed that paradise was filled full of virgins that would fulfill all the guy's desires. Muhammad heard this, it got incorporated into his belief system. The Zoroastrians also believed in jinns or genies, spirits that follow people around for good or bad. Well, that is where we get the word genie, and also the word genius. So a genius was somebody that had genies that followed him around and told him all the answers. So the next time somebody says, you're a genius, you can say, no, I just have a high IQ. So this was Persia, it was Zoroastrian. There was a religion named Manichaeism. A guy named Mani, a couple centuries before Muhammad, would combine little pieces of different faiths. A little Buddhism, a little Christianity, and so forth. And then Muhammad could not read, which is not uncommon for that area of the world. The UN Development Program reported in 2011 that 30 to 40% of people in Egypt today cannot read. And so the Jews and Christians were the exception. They were called people of the book. Now you might say, how could Muhammad, if he could not read, how could he memorize all these verses? In Arabic, they had a little rhyme to them, a little beat, very similar to rap music today. So you have a student that maybe can't read in school, but he memorizes these long rap songs. And anyway, so Muhammad was never able to read the Old Testament, but he heard their oral stories called Talmud and Mishnah. Some of those stories got incorporated into his belief system. And then there's the Christian faith. And even Encyclopedia Britannica stated of Muhammad, the gospel was known to him chiefly through apocryphal and heretical sources. So Muhammad thought the Trinity was the Father, Mary, and Jesus. Nobody explained to him the Holy Spirit. And so apocryphal, what are some apocryphal works? Well, one was the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. It was written several centuries after Christ by someone who knew nothing of Jewish life. It's filled full of so many errors and inconsistencies that no scholar takes it serious. It would be like you writing us childhood stories of Abraham Lincoln and you're placing him at the beach in Florida. I mean, it was like he wasn't there. So, but anyway, so in this infancy gospel, which has never been taken serious by any scholar, it has these fanciful stories that Jesus spoke from the cradle, made clay birds and clapped and they flew away and raised a playmate from the dead. Guess what stories Muhammad heard in the desert, and they got incorporated into his belief system, that Jesus spoke from the cradle, made clay birds and clapped, and they flew away and raised a playmate from the dead. There's no other place in ancient literature that these stories appear other than this infancy gospel that no one then or now takes serious. But Muhammad heard it, it's now in the Quran, they take it as fact. So we can identify the different beliefs that were there. Now, when Encyclopedia Britannica said the gospel was known to Muhammad through apocryphal and heretical sources, what were the heresies? Well, there was Arianism that said Jesus was mostly man. Nestorianism said Jesus was mostly God. Monophysitism said he was man and God, but the two natures didn't mix. Docetism said he was completely God. And Ebionism said he was completely man. See how complicated this is? Imagine if you were illiterate in the desert trying to sort through all this with the Zoroastrian stuff, the Persian stuff, the pagan stuff, the Jewish oral traditions, and so forth. So Muhammad has his faith. He is very excited about it. He goes into the city of Mecca, and for 12 years he only makes 70 converts. And he gets confrontational because he had thought that there was something in it for everyone, and this would be something that the whole world would be excited on. But after 12 years, he stays around that Kaaba, that square building in Mecca, and he begins to insult the pagans and tell them that they're going to burn in hell. All their ancestors are burning in hell. And so the pagans consider him as disturbing the peace. They chase Muhammad out of town in the year 622 AD. And he flees north 210 miles to a Jewish city called Medina. The Jews are nice, they let him in, they listen to his faith, but they reject his faith. And so Muhammad goes into the pagan minority neighborhoods in the Jewish city of Medina, and Muhammad begins to organize a following. We're familiar with the term of organizing in the community. He gets a following, he goes back to the Jewish leaders of the town, and he actually plays upon the victimhood of the people, saying, you know, you don't have any voice, the Jews control the government in this town. And so he pressures the Jews to make a treaty with him, and now he is a political leader in addition to being a religious leader. Then something happens. Muhammad's followers in Mecca, they get pushy, argumentative, confrontational, threatening, the way some of his followers are today. They get chased out of town for disturbing the peace. They go to Medina, and Muhammad allows them to rob the caravans headed to Mecca in retaliation for the Meccans chasing them out of town. And so you can see the caravan routes, they go through Medina, then through Mecca, so Muhammad and his warriors would rob them. So where Jesus said, if they take your coat, give them your shirt, Muhammad's attitude was, if they take your house, you retaliate, take their caravan. He actually got a whole chapter of the Quran from his Allah on how to distribute booty from robbing caravans. It's Surah 8, chapter 8. He gets a fifth of the booty. And so the Meccans send 1,000 soldiers to protect their caravan, and Muhammad with 300 warriors defeats 1,000 at the Battle of Badr in 624 AD. This amazing victory, having been outnumbered 3-1, convinces Muhammad to be a military leader. And he fights in 66 battles and raids in the next 8 years before he dies. He even used the catapult when he attacked a city called Al-Taif. And when he was told that the catapult was killing women and children, his response was, they are among them. So they got to be killed too. So suicide bombers and ISIS killers and Chattanooga shooters and Oklahoma beheaders and beheaders of military in the streets of London and killers in France, they think they're following Muhammad's example religiously, politically, and militarily. So there's freedom for all religions in America. But Islam is not just a religion, because Muhammad was not just a religious leader. He was a political and a military leader. And so a mosque is a religious building, a political building, and a military building. Bowing to Mecca is a religious bowing, a political bowing, and a military pledging of allegiance to another capital. And our effort in the West to split the religious side of Islam away from the political military side is we're trying to split Muhammad. Who are we to split their prophet? He was all three. And though many Muslims have backslidden from following Muhammad's example, and we call them peaceful Muslims, now there are many that are beginning to want to follow his example closer. We call them fundamental Muslims or radical Muslims. And they are following him religiously, politically, and militarily. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So you can remember RPM, like in your car, revolution per minute. So there's two sets of verses in the Quran based on the two cities Muhammad lived in. The verses he gets from his Allah in Mecca are called Meccan verses. They're just religious and a little more peaceful. The verses he gets in Medina are political, military, and violent. And the later verses supersede the earlier verses. By way of comparison, in the Bible there is an Old Testament and a New Testament. Old Testament has some violence, Moses and David, wiping out cities and so forth. In the New Testament, Jesus and the apostles did not kill anyone. And so what do Christians say today? Well, WWJD, what would Jesus do? The later example is the one we're going to strive to imitate, right? It's more peaceful. It's the same way in Islam, only in reverse. Their peaceful verses came first when Muhammad was in Mecca. They're called weak verses, and they're superseded by the later verses that come in Medina. They're called strong verses. So in 627 AD, the Meccans send 10,000 soldiers to Medina to stop Muhammad and his men from robbing their caravans. It turns out Muhammad is a brilliant military leader, primarily because he's creative, he's unpredictable, he's unconventional. For example, these pagans would have a month off from fighting. It was their pilgrimage month, sort of like their Ramadan month, and they would all go to Mecca and worship their different pagan gods. Well, Muhammad gets verses from his Allah instructing him to attack the caravans during this month. And he catches them totally off guard and comes away with a lot of booty. Well, the Meccans are sending their 10,000 soldiers to Medina. Muhammad's version of roadside bombs and IEDs was he dug potholes and trenches all around the city of Medina, which rendered the superior